Imagine the American airline industry as a fortress protected by towering walls of backlogged orders and ironclad union agreements. Suddenly, a small crack appears, and one airline, Avelo, is about to drive a fleet of 50 new jets right through it. How did they discover this weakness in the duopoly's armor? What makes their new Embraer E2 jets the perfect siege engine for this attack? Will they successfully breach the fortress and change the landscape forever? Or will the giants crush them before they get through? Here's what's really happening. If you're an airline and you want to buy the workhorse jets that power global travel, the Airbus A320 or the Boeing 737, you can't. Not for tomorrow, not for next year. The production lines are saturated. The order books are full. Airbus and Boeing have a combined backlog of over 14,500 aircraft. New delivery slots aren't available until 2032. It's a traffic jam that stretches for nearly a decade, a fundamental bottleneck that chokes growth for ambitious carriers like Spirit, Frontier, and Allegiant. They have the routes, they have the demand, but they simply cannot get the planes. This is the iron grip of the duopoly, a system that forces every airline to wait its turn. But what if you didn't have to wait? What if you could just sidestep the entire system? In September 2025, Avelo Airlines did exactly that. They announced a blockbuster $7 billion deal not with Airbus or Boeing, but with the Brazilian manufacturer Embraer. 50 firm orders for the next generation E195-E2 with purchase rights for 50 more. And the first deliveries? They start in 2027. This isn't just a clever purchase, it's time arbitrage. While its competitors are stuck in a holding pattern for the better part of a decade, Avelo will be putting brand new, hyper-efficient jets into the sky. Think about what that head start means. Every 10 new aircraft can generate between $50 and $100 million in annual revenue. With 50 jets arriving by 2029, Avelo is unlocking over $1.2 billion in potential revenue before its rivals even get their first new plane off the assembly line. This isn't just a fleet update, it's a strategic coup. A calculated move to compound growth years ahead of the competition. They didn't beat the market, they left it behind. But here's where the strategy gets even more brilliant. Getting planes early is one thing, but Avelo chose a plane that solves a uniquely American problem, one that has kept the most efficient regional jets out of the country for years. This isn't just about bypassing the queue, it's about bypassing the rules. For decades, a single paragraph in the pilot union contracts of America's major airlines has dictated the shape of the skies. It's called the Scope Clause, and it's the invisible wall that protects mainline pilot jobs by strictly limiting the size and number of aircraft that can be flown by their regional partners. The rules are brutally simple. Regional affiliates operating flights for American Eagle, Delta Connection, or United Express cannot fly jets with more than 76 seats or with a maximum takeoff weight exceeding 86,000 pounds. This clause effectively killed the market for larger, more efficient regional jets in the United States. Planes like the Embraer E190 and E195-E2, which can seat between 120 and 140 passengers and weigh over 135,000 pounds, were dead on arrival. They were too big for regional carriers but often too small for the mainline fleets, trapping them in a commercial no man's land. They offered the economics of a much larger jet without the trip costs, but the scope clause made them untouchable. Until now. Here's the hack. Avelo isn't a regional affiliate, it's a mainline ultra-low-cost carrier. The scope clause simply doesn't apply to them. They aren't flying for anyone, they are flying for themselves. By purchasing the E195-E2 as a mainline carrier, Avelo single-handedly breaks the curse. They have unlocked an aircraft that is perfectly optimized for their strategy, a plane the legacy carrier's business model forbids them from using effectively. This is the breakthrough. They get the big jet economics without the scope clause handcuffs. The numbers are staggering. On the 500 to 1,000 mile routes that are Avelo's bread and butter, the E2 delivers a cost per available seat mile, or CASM, that is 15% lower than a Boeing 737. That translates to an operating cost of roughly $2,000 per hour. This efficiency unlocks an estimated $10 million in annual savings for every 10 aircraft they fly, compared to what a regional operator would face. Avelo has turned a regulatory barrier designed to protect the legacy carriers into a competitive weapon against them. They've found found a plane that the airline Mafia legally firewalled out of the market and made it the centerpiece of their entire strategy. But this jet doesn't just unlock economic advantages, it unlocks geography. Avelo is using the E2 to build a network where the giants can't even land. Look at a route map for any major American airline and you'll see a familiar pattern: the hub and spoke. A web of flights all funneling through massive fortress hubs like Atlanta, Dallas, or Chicago. It's a model built for big planes and big airports, but America is a country of small cities and small airports, thousands of them bypassed by this system. This is the territory Avelo is claiming. Their entire thesis is built on connecting small, underserved airports directly, point to point, letting passengers skip the dreaded hub connection. The problem? Many of these smaller airports have shorter runways. Places like Key West, with a runway of just 4,800 feet, are notoriously difficult to operate from. A Boeing 737 can land there, but its performance is severely limited, especially on hot days. It can't take off with a full load of passengers and enough fuel for a long flight. This is a fundamental performance constraint that keeps the big airlines out of these lucrative niche markets. Avelo's current fleet of older 737s faces the same limitations, but the Embraer E195-E2 changes the equation entirely. This jet was purpose-built for exactly these kinds of demanding conditions. But the real secret weapon is a piece of technology called the Embraer Takeoff System, or E2TS. It's a fully automated takeoff rotation system. Instead of the pilot pulling back on the stick, the plane's fly-by-wire system computes the absolute perfect rotation angle and speed, executing it flawlessly every single time. This precision removes the variables of human technique, allowing the plane to be certified to use a much shorter length of runway safely. The performance gains are game-changing. From a short runway like Key West's, the E2TS allows the E195-E2 to take off with 20% more payload, or, crucially, adds another 400 nautical miles of range. Suddenly, a route like Key West to Raleigh, a 700-mile flight, becomes easily doable with a full load of 130 passengers. Avelo is planning to build its future on this capability, targeting the 40% of US airports with runways under 5,000 feet, airfields that are effectively unreachable by their competitors' larger jets. This is how they deliver on their promise of same fare, fewer stops. By cutting out the hub, they can reduce travel times by 30% on over 60% of their planned routes. They're not just selling a cheap ticket, they're selling time. Think this obsession with small jet performance is universal? Think again. Avelo's biggest rival in the small jet space, Breeze Airways, made a very different bet, and the divergence reveals just how deep Avelo's strategy goes. When you think of a new generation small narrow-body jet, another aircraft immediately comes to mind, the Airbus A220. It's the crown jewel of Breeze Airways, another startup focused on point-to-point routes. On the surface, the A220 and the E195-E2 seem like direct competitors. Both offer incredible efficiency and passenger comfort. So why did Avelo deliberately choose the Embraer jet, bucking the industry trend? The answer lies in a subtle but critical difference in strategy. Breeze is using the A220's exceptional range to fly longer, thinner routes, coast-to-coast flights, and even potential transatlantic crossings. It's a plane built for range, but Avelo isn't flying 2,000-mile routes. Their network is built on shorter 1 to 3 hour flights. And in that sweet spot, the E195-E2 is simply the better weapon. It's lighter and optimized for the constant takeoffs and landings of a short-haul network. On a typical 500 to 1,500-mile segment, the E2 burns 2.2 tons of fuel per hour, significantly less than the A220's 2.8 tons. But the most calculated part of this decision has nothing to do with fuel burn. It's about reliability. Both the A220 and the E2 are powered by the same revolutionary family of Pratt & Whitney geared turbofan, or GTF, engines. However, they use different models. The A220 uses the PW1500G, an engine that has been plagued by well-publicized reliability and maintenance issues, forcing airlines to ground planes for extended periods. The E2, on the other hand, uses the PW1900G, Because the E2 is a lighter aircraft flying shorter missions, its engines run at lower thrust settings and are under less stress. The result, the PW1900G has suffered 18% fewer maintenance disruptions than its sibling on the A220. This isn't a minor detail, it's a massive financial and operational advantage. Fewer disruptions mean less downtime, higher aircraft utilization, and lower maintenance costs, to the tune of an estimated $1.5 million per aircraft per year. Avelo didn't just choose a plane, they chose a more reliable engine. It's an under-discussed reliability hedge that protects their entire business model from the kind of turmoil that has hobbled other carriers. It's a quiet, deliberate choice that prioritizes operational stability over headline-grabbing range. This principle of picking the right tool for the job extends beyond just the engine. It's about the size of the aircraft itself. For an ultra-low-cost carrier, every empty seat is a failure. The business model is built on filling planes to the absolute brim. This is where Avelo's current fleet of Boeing 737s, while cheap to acquire, becomes a liability. The smaller 737-700 seats 149 passengers, and the larger 800 model seats 189. These are big airplanes for the small city pairs Avelo serves. On 65% of their routes, the airline has struggled to push load factors beyond 75 to 80%. That's a lot of empty seats, a lot of wasted fuel, and a lot of lost revenue. The airline is essentially using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. The E195-E2 is the precision tool they've been missing. With a flexible seating configuration of between 120 and 140 seats in a typical low-cost layout, the E2 perfectly matches the demand on these thinner routes. It's a concept known as right sizing. Avelo anticipates that the smaller capacity will allow them to boost load factors to a much healthier 88 to 92%. This isn't just about making the numbers on a spreadsheet look better. Higher load factors have a cascading effect across the entire operation. It means every dollar spent on fuel and crew is generating more revenue. The savings are estimated to be around $600,000 per year for every single aircraft. Furthermore, the E2's smaller footprint and superior performance grant it access to 35 small airfields like Tweed, New Haven in Connecticut, where the larger 737s struggle to operate consistently. This allows Avelo to open up 20 new markets by 2029, markets their competitors literally cannot reach. This is the small jet, high-frequency model that has been perfected by European low-cost carriers, but it has never been successfully scaled in the United States. Avelo is betting that the unique geography of America's forgotten cities combined with the perfect right-sized aircraft is the winning formula. But just as Avelo was preparing to launch this highly focused Eastern strategy, they made a move that looked to the outside world like a catastrophic failure. They began a massive retreat. In early 2025, the headlines were brutal. Avelo was in retreat. The airline announced it was pulling out of 12 routes on the West Coast, effectively abandoning its secondary base at Hollywood Burbank Airport. To industry observers, the writing was on the wall. This was the classic sign of a struggling startup, overextended and now forced into a painful contraction. It looked like the beginning of the end. But it wasn't a retreat, it was a repositioning. This move wasn't a sign of weakness, it was an act of extreme strategic focus. Avelo was deliberately cutting its losses on the fragmented and hyper-competitive West Coast market to consolidate all of its resources, crew, and capital on the East Coast. They were sharpening the tip of the spear right before the arrival of their new E2 fleet. This wasn't a contraction, it was a concentration of force. By 2028, Avelo plans to be operating a dense network of over 60 point-to-point routes, all east of the Mississippi, all flown by the hyper-efficient E2. They are building a fortress in markets the legacy carriers have abandoned. Look at Wilmington, North Carolina. Avelo is targeting a 22% market share there by 2030, a level of dominance that could generate $800 million in annual revenue from a single region. Click here to check out another one of our videos.